Ethan and Claire had always wanted a child. Years of failed fertility treatments had left them emotionally drained, so when the agency called about a young boy needing a home, they didn't hesitate. His name was Oliver. He was 6 years old, pale-skinned, and unsettlingly quiet. The social worker warned them that Oliver had never spoken a word in his life. No babbling as a baby, no first words, no cries. He wasn't deaf, wasn't mute, just silent. Claire had brushed off the warning. "He just needs love," she told Ethan, squeezing his hand. "We can give him that." Their first weeks with Oliver were filled with cautious optimism. He was eerily well-behaved, never throwing tantrums, never demanding attention. He simply watched them with wide, unblinking eyes, his presence like a shadow in their home. At night, he sat cross-legged in his bed, staring at the wall until sleep took him. The house had always been quiet, but now it felt different. Stifling. Heavy. As if the walls were pressing inward, listening. Oliver's silence wasn't just the absence of speech, it was something deeper, something unnatural. The way he moved, the way he watched, it unsettled Claire more than she wanted to admit. Then came the whispers. It started as a faint sound, low murmurs that Ethan dismissed as the wind or the old pipes in their Victorian house. But Claire wasn't so sure. The noises seemed to originate from Oliver's room. More specifically, from Oliver himself. One evening, as she passed his door, she heard it clearly. A voice. Low, guttural, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. The hair on her arms stood on end. She held her breath, pressing her ear to the door. The whispering was rapid, feverish, layered, as though multiple voices were speaking at once. Her pulse pounded in her throat. She turned the knob slowly, pushing the door open. Oliver sat on the floor in the darkness, his back to her. The air in the room was different, colder, dense with something unseen. Shadows pulled unnaturally in the corners. His lips weren't moving, yet the voice continued, relentless, insidious. "Oliver," she called softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The voice stopped. The room fell into suffocating silence. Oliver turned his head, moving too slowly, too precisely. His wide eyes found hers, empty and bottomless. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Claire exhaled, relief washing over her, but then something else breathed against her ear. A voice, rasping, hungry. "He's listening." A cold rush of air slid down her spine, and she stumbled back with a strangled cry, slamming the light switch on. The room flooded with brightness, revealing nothing but Oliver, still sitting there, still watching. But the feeling lingered. The heavy presence. The certainty that something else had been there, just moments ago. Oliver blinked slowly. And then, a smile. Small, almost imperceptible, curling at the edges of his lips. Claire fled the room, heart hammering, locking herself in the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face, gripping the sink until her knuckles turned white. She tried to convince herself it was just exhaustion, just paranoia. But in the silence, beyond the door, she swore she heard it again. A whisper. Laughing. Ethan didn't believe her. "You were dreaming," he insisted. "Sleep deprivation does weird things to the mind." Claire wanted to believe him. But the next night, the whispers returned, louder this time. More insistent. She shook Ethan awake. "Listen," she whispered. From down the hall, Oliver's room buzzed with that inhuman murmur. Ethan's skepticism melted as he sat up, face draining of color. He grabbed the baseball bat from beneath the bed and motioned for Claire to stay put. She followed anyway. The whispers grew frenzied as they neared the door. The air felt electric, charged with something unseen, something watching. Ethan flung it open. Silence. Oliver sat on his bed, eyes wide, expression blank. The room was ice cold, the shadows in the corners darker than they should be. Then, from behind them, the closet door creaked open. A low chuckle echoed from within. Ethan spun, bat raised. The closet was empty, but the darkness inside it was wrong, deeper than a shadow should be, shifting as if alive. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "We're leaving." He reached for Oliver, but the child jerked away, staring at him with something close to fear. Then the bedroom light flickered out. And all hell broke loose. The walls trembled, the room filling with a cacophony of whispers. The temperature plummeted, their breath misting before them. A rancid scent filled the air, like decay and damp earth. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand and bolted for the door. It slammed shut. A force yanked Claire backward. She screamed as icy hands, many hands, clawed at her ankles. Fingernails scraped her skin, their grip cold and relentless. She thrashed, kicking at the unseen force, heart pounding. Then, Oliver spoke. It wasn't his voice. "Leave him." The voice was ancient, layered, as if multiple voices spoke at once. Claire turned her head, her breath hitching. Oliver stood in the center of the room, but something loomed behind him, a figure wrapped in shifting shadows, its face a writhing mass of mouths whispering in unison. The darkness stretched toward them, tendrils creeping like grasping fingers. "Leave the boy," it commanded again. Ethan lunged, pulling Claire free. He threw open the door, dragging her down the hallway. Behind them, the whispers surged into a shriek. The house shook, the walls splitting with unseen force, pictures crashing to the floor. They reached the front door. Ethan fumbled with the lock as Claire sobbed, staring back toward the hallway. Oliver stood there, watching them. His lips curled in the smallest of smiles. The thing behind him grinned, its mouth stretching impossibly wide, rows of teeth glistening in the dim light. The door flew open, and they stumbled into the night, into the safety of streetlights and the world that still made sense. They never looked back. The authorities found the house empty the next day. No child. No trace of the entity that had lurked within. Ethan and Claire moved across the country, changed their numbers, erased every trace of Oliver from their lives. But some nights, Claire still wakes to whispers in the dark. And a child's laughter that isn't there. Claire thought she had escaped it. That it was over. But one evening, as she stood in the bathroom brushing her teeth, she glanced up at the mirror. Oliver stood behind her. Her scream caught in her throat as the reflection showed his lips moving, whispering. But when she turned, there was nothing there. Just empty air. She barely had time to back away before the lights flickered, and the air turned ice cold. From the mirror, the whispering rose into a cacophony. And then, hands reached through the glass. She had time for one last scream before they pulled her in.